And we return to you with Gerald Glasser right here at the Lakers Fast Break. Cannot thank you enough for sticking around with us here at the Lakers Fast Break. Please like and subscribe to get the latest notifications on when we go live on the air with the latest Lakers Fast Break podcasts. We'll tell you what, in part two of our conversations on the Eastern Conference, another awesome guest who has stopped by for one of our many NBA team previews is back to talk about the teams that he covers in the Eastern Conference, plus an overall look at the Eastern Conference to see if he has the same opinions as Alfred Esmond did earlier in the show. It is, of course, Mike Anguilano. Mike does a great job with Fear the Sword and the Palace of Pistons, part of the Believe Network podcast. So go ahead and everyone give a big shout out to Mike Anguilano. Anguilano M22 on Twitter. Please follow him there if you can. Mike, it's great to have you back on the show. You've been watching us from afar. It has been noticed and it has been appreciated, my friend.
Yes, I have been watching. I like to keep up and see what other fans think of the Eastern Conference, and deadline time is always content creation time across the NBA. Everyone wants to fire off a take. Everyone wants to throw out their mock trade. So yeah, I'm always looking forward to tuning in.
Absolutely. Even if it is Joe Soro yelling half the time, that's good. I'm glad to have you here. But truly appreciate you joining us. It is, of course, Mike Anguilano. Please go ahead and support him on his shows if you want to find out more about the Cavs and the Pistons. Fear the Sword for the Cavs and Palace of Pistons for the Pistons. First thing I do want to ask you, this is, of course, talking about the Eastern Conference in general. As I spoke to Alfred, of course, we've seen the domination so far in the first, I don't want to say half of the season, first 50-ish games of the season by the Boston Celtics. Are you buying in? Because you cover a team in the Cavs that has a say in it, but we'll discuss them here in a few minutes, along with some of the other Eastern Conference contenders. I want to hear your thoughts on it, but are you buying? Are you all in on what the Boston Celtics are doing this season?
I'm more all in than I have been in the past. They went out and addressed a lot of the things that were shortcomings for them last year. The addition of Porzingis has been great. We all knew that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were going to play exceptionally well, as they usually do. But, it seems like through the addition of Drew Holiday and with Porzingis, they have the, added front court depth. They have a guy in Holiday who's one of the best defenders in the league, and he doesn't have to play second banana anymore like he did in Milwaukee, which we kind of saw was running into a wall. He can play third or sometimes even fourth if Derek White or Porzingis are both playing well. I think Boston's made the right moves. They're clearly the best team in the league right now, even though they did lose to Denver. I would still put them as the best team in the league, and they are the title favorites to me still. Things get dicey in a 7-game series, as both you and I know. Seeing LeBron James, stars come out when it's playoff time, and are the Celtics going to have enough star power to push through a 7-game series against Giannis and Dame, or against the Sixers when Embiid is back, or against those snappy Cavaliers who have their own high level players in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, but I am believing in them this year. I think if they don't win a championship, it's going to be a very interesting offseason in Boston. But as of right now, it's hard to bet against them. Both defensively and offensively, they look much more complete than they ever have in years past.
Let me ask you, obviously injuries aside, because I discussed that with Alfred, if there was a key injury somewhere on the Boston Celtics, just like with any other team, that could derail their future. Do you see any points of contention that you might have? Let's say a Cleveland, let's say a Philadelphia, let's say a Milwaukee gets, with them in a 7-game series. Do you see a point of contention for them as far as possibly a weakness in their armor?
Yeah, their depth is certainly questionable when they traded all of those pieces to get Drew Holiday, like Malcolm Brogdon, like Robert Williams III, they inevitably had to give up on a little bit of depth to make that happen. But in the playoffs, you're not running with your normal larger rotations. You're pretty much down to 7 or 8. But depth could be in question. If someone gets in foul trouble, if Horford gets hurt, I mean, he is older. If somebody does get into foul trouble and they have to, go a little bit deeper to like, Peyton Pritchard or Sam Hauser, maybe there are, some more chinks in the armor, but that might be the only way. I mean, Tatum and Brown have been together a long enough time that they are going to have to go up and be superstars when it matters. But I think having guys like Holiday, who has a championship, and Porzingis, who is playing well, he's another injury risk guy. There's just no way around it. But I think they have enough of the pieces around Tatum and Brown that even if they do struggle to shoot, they can still stick into games. They're still a very high defensive floor team. But depth would be the only thing that might make things a little bit dicey for them. The other aspect is that, hey, a Giannis or a Dame, if they're the best player out on the floor any given night, it gives them a chance to win. It gives the Bucks a chance to win. But I think the Celtics have enough in their top 7 that they are able to withstand, the onslaught. They're at least more able to withstand that onslaught than they ever have before, which was kind of the whole point.
Once again, I'm on with Mike Anguilano. He's covering the Eastern Conference for the Pistons and the Cavs. Please go ahead and check out the great work that he does. Part of the Believe Network for Fear the Sword and the Palace of Pistons podcast. Want to ask you this, though, when it comes right down to it, the Celtics, again, obviously have looked dominant so far in this part of the season. But your Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the 2 teams that you cover, has got to be a team that has been considered. In fact, Alfred mentioned it earlier, 2 losses since the calendar switched over to 2024. They have been the best team in the NBA so far this calendar year. Now they have all their pieces a lot healthier and in place. I know that Mobley has not been – you have not even gotten the best of Evan Mobley. Whether or not that fully fits with him and Jared Allen remains to be seen. Darius Garland, that's been touch and go, but he's come back to the lineup. Tell me, what are the thoughts and feelings of the fans right now as far as Cleveland's chances to go all the way to the finals this year?
Well, we were very high on the Cavs last year too, and they got rolled in the first round. So I think there's some cautious optimism this time around. They are playing outstanding basketball. They didn't make a trade at the deadline, which some people were upset about. Some people were fine with. I was one of the people fine with it. They have a very deep team. They're getting contributions from so many players that were not viable off the bench last year, and like Dean Wade, who is one of the best wing defenders in the league this year, and Sam Merrill, who Donovan Mitchell gave a shout out to during the 3-point shootout by having the Money Merrill jersey.
Yes.
So they're getting contributions all over the floor. You're right. Darius has not been healthy. Mobley has not been healthy, but Craig Porter Jr. Has been just a huge success story for them, solidifying the backup point guard role after Ricky Rubio retired, and Ty Jerome has had an ankle injury all season. He hasn't even played. There's some cautious optimism with the Cavs. Mitchell is playing as well as he did last year, maybe not as efficient, but overall he's a superstar that's gluing everybody together. Mobley's starting to take more threes and looks a lot more competent on the offensive end. Jared Allen should have been an all-star. He was snubbed over Scotty Barnes, but Allen's been a double-double machine, and he's been playing a lot more confident, which was an issue last year when he said, hey, the lights were too bright, and kind of admitted that he wasn't ready for the moment. They are deep. JB Bickerstaff is coaching them in a way that he just didn't last year. Last year, the offense was very, very vanilla. This year, he's, starting to evolve the offense a little bit more. He's gotten a lot out of Mitchell on the defensive end, which was a big problem last year. The Cavs are once again a top 5 team in the league in defense. and now they have a lot more shooting and a much more capable bench. So, they don't have the superstar power that a Milwaukee or a Boston has, but they have like a camaraderie and teamwork level that is very hard to beat. It's hard to beat again, or it's hard to go against. They're firing on all cylinders right now. But of course, we thought that last year too, and then they faced a Knicks team that just wanted it more. So, it's going to be very telling what happens when they go into the first round, whoever they're playing. Are they going to be up to the challenge to face, like, let's just say, the Miami Heat, who are a tough out no matter what? Or if the Sixers fall far enough in the standings and all of a sudden they get Joel Embiid back, and now you're having to go up against him healthy with a Sixers team that prior to him being injured was very good. So it'll be very telling. Or they could end up playing the Knicks again, and they could have just PTSD. So they're playing as good as anybody. I think they can make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think they're good enough to do that. And it's just going to depend on, are they going to have the tenacity to get out of the first round and get that monkey off their back? Because after that, I think they can. I mean, they've already shown they can beat the Bucks. They beat the Bucks twice already in the last couple of weeks here. Haven't had as much luck with Boston, but this is a different team than it was at the beginning of the year. I'm confident in them to at least make it out of the first round, but I think they have the capability to go all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals if things fall right.
Let me ask you this, though, when it comes right down to it. Once again, it is Mike Anguilano. Please go ahead and support him today on his great podcast, Fear the Sword and Palace of Pistons on the Believe Podcast Network. Wanted to ask you this, though, with Boston, getting back to Boston real quick, because it just hit me. Could this be a one-and-done year for Boston if they don't get it right because of the fact that the ever-looming extension for Jason Tatum is out there? And this team will become huge as far as paying the tax bill when he signs at that dotted line and that kicks in. Then you've got Jaylen Browns, then you got Porzingis, Holiday, you got the whole, Derek White. That, yes, just those five alone will kill you on your tax. Do you feel that this is a now or never situation? Not never, but let's say, but now or restructuring deal coming up, as far as if they don't win the title now, they'll have to go ahead and seriously consider making major moves this summer?
They're very title or bust, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're financially going to be strapped coming into the offseason. And, moving Jaylen Brown might be on the table. Maybe they're not able to compete with a Drew Holiday offer from another team. I think it will be championship or bust for them. Otherwise, they are going to have to make some moves, or they're going to have to weather the storm, pay the tax. I mean, I don't think that that's how it's going to be. I think if they don't win the championship, they're going to have to look at different ways to modify that roster to fit without being so unwieldingly expensive that, they're stars and scrubs. But they have the most pressure probably in the league. Denver has gotten the monkey off their back. Giannis does have a ring already, and him and Dame seem to be fine, when there is a little bit more of a window for them. Your Lakers are always Tyler bust when you're with LeBron, but probably won't happen this year. And then the other teams out west, OKC, Minnesota. Minnesota is a sneaky, got to figure it out quickly team, because Karl Anthony Towns, could be an off-season trade guy because they're about to be in the expensive tier as well. But
I think if they keep, the key for them in the playoffs is, can they keep Rudy Gobert on the floor? If they can't figure that out,
right.
Because every year Rudy Gobert is in the playoffs, he always gets played off the floor. If he can stay on the floor, they can go a long way.
Right. So they might be in a, make a deep run or have to trade away Karl Anthony Towns. But Philadelphia, again, it seems like they're always Tyler bust, but now they're getting a little bit of leeway with Embiid being out. Hopefully he comes back and is able to make an impact in the playoffs. So I think Boston's probably the most title or bust team in the league right now. And I do think that because of their financial situation, Jaylen Brown's extension, Jason Tatum's extension, they're going to have to make some interesting moves this offseason if they're unable to win a championship. But I do think that they're the most well-equipped team to make a run to the NBA Finals and win a championship this year. It's just a matter of if they can get over their own hump, which has been lately it's been the Heat. They got rolled for the most part last year. If they can sort of get over that Eastern Conference Finals hurdle, then they're obviously a very dangerous team.
Once again, it is Mike Anguilano. Please go ahead and support him today at the Paths of Pistons podcast, but also as well, of course, Fear the Sword is available on the Believe Podcast Network. Wanted to ask you this when it comes your fan base in Cleveland sounds like they're cautiously optimistic because they've been through this scenario before with the same crews. So I get that. When you've got Milwaukee out there, Milwaukee just seems, and I said this with Alfred, I think in a 7-game series, if you have both Giannis and Damian Lillard both going over 30 points a game in a series, I think that's going to be hard to stop no matter how bad their defense is. Your thoughts on Milwaukee, if they can ever get anything close to resembling a competent defense, and if Middleton shows up on top of that, they could get back to some winning ways in the playoffs.
Oh yeah. We were talking about this in our Fear the Sword group chat at the beginning of the year after Boston traded for Drew Holiday. Who would you rather face in the playoffs? And we all unanimously said the Bucks. You'd rather face the Bucks. The defensive work that the Celtics do, being able to switch, and they have a much better wing defenders. They have good guard defenders, which makes things a lot more difficult for a very guard-heavy, focused offense that the Cavs have with Mitchell and with Garland. I would much rather face the Bucks. That being said, when the going gets tough and you have Giannis and Lillard, that's very, very hard to go up against for anybody. It's the same thing for the Sixers or for Boston. Going up against those two in a 7-game series should be scary. I think the Bucks are a little bit. Well, now that they have Doc Rivers, they have gone through a lot of turmoil this year. They're a little bit weaker than I think we'd like to admit, even though that their top end is very good with Giannis and with Dame. As a Cavs fan, I'd much rather face them than Boston in a playoff series. I think that they're a little bit easier to neutralize. Drew was a little bit taller of a guard, and he was a much better defender than Dame, obviously, and Dame is certainly a much better offensive player. But for some reason, the Bucks haven't really clicked, whether it's been their defense has just not been as good, and it hasn't. It's not been top 10 this year. I think it's more like top 22 in the league in defensive rating. It's not very good. But that being said, they're still towards the top of the conference. In a playoff series, Dame and Giannis are going to get theirs. But if I'm a Cavs fan, I would rather face the Bucks over Boston for sure. I think the Cavs match up a lot better. They're also a very good defensive team. They're guard heavy, but they have a lot more capable shooters in Strus, Niang off the bench. Dean Wade is a threat from deep, and Allen's playing with more confidence. And Mobley has a few more wrinkles in his game on offense. Overall, I would definitely rather face the Bucks, but Dame and Giannis are going to be tough to stop no matter what. No matter what. Doc being the head coach does make me feel a little bit more at ease because he has a tendency to not win the playoff games that he needs to win. It's just kind of in his DNA. But, hey, you're going to take your chances with Dame and Giannis, right? It's not a bad position to be in if you're Doc Rivers, but they look a little bit more vulnerable as of late. I think they got mashed against Denver. They lost game against the Jazz maybe a week and a half before the All-Star break. They just haven't looked right. That doesn't mean that's going to translate over to the playoffs, though.
I do want to ask, Alfred was very high on the Philadelphia 76ers if they get Embiid back, as far as being possibly the one dynamic force that can transcend, if he's healthy, through a 7-game series against the Boston Celtics. He thinks they're the one force that the Celtics couldn't stop if Maxey is providing enough help offensively. Embiid could go for 35, 37 in a 7-game series, and then you have Maxey coming up with 25 to 30. That could be also tough to stop. Your thoughts on Philadelphia 76ers should Joel Embiid get back to health?
The ceiling is extremely high, obviously. I mean, Embiid has been putting up insane Wilt Chamberlain level numbers this year. He transcends their ability as an offense to basically him as the center has proven to be extremely valuable. Maxey has taken on a James Harden-esque role and has filled that well. They don't miss James Harden at all. And by the way, by doing that, they're able to set themselves up for a big offseason if they wanted to go and spend some. They have the ability to do that too. But outside of Maxey and Embiid, they're still very deep. Kelly Oubre has been good. He torched the Cavs the other night en route to a Sixers win against a fully healthy Cavs team. While Philly didn't have Embiid, so that's worth something as well. They have capable playoff guys, Robert Covington, Nick Batum. I mean, they've got players who can play and have played in bigger situations. But Embiid's ability to just control the flow of the game on both ends of the floor, he's able to be the best offensive player on the floor and a defensive anchor. He can do enough to pull the Sixers past Boston. And this will be the toughest test yet, as Boston's probably the best that they have been. And Embiid is playing at the best that he has ever been. It'll be a very fun playoff series if they do face each other. I'm high on the Sixers as well if they get Embiid back before the playoffs. They got the depth. They have Nick Nurse, who has also been in these types of scenarios before. The sky's the limit for them if he is back and healthy. But that is the biggest question is he going to come back? Is that knee not going to be too cranky? That forces him to play limited minutes. But I am high on the Sixers as well. I think that they've pivoted so well from having to trade James Harden that the position they're in is just nothing short of a miracle. It's not too often you trade a guy like James Harden and you're better than you were the year prior. But they've managed to do that.
So those are probably the standout teams, I think, in the Eastern Conference. But the New York Knicks seem to be all over the place. Some people think they're real contenders. Some people still think they're a little ways away. Yeah, they're tough to figure out right now. Yes, they were riding high 9-game winning streak recently until the Lakers snapped that. They've kind of gotten in a little bit of disarray because of their injury issues that they have, and they have legitimate injury concerns at this point in time. Your thoughts, though, with Jalen Brunson carrying your team, how far can they go?
Well, the Knicks certainly think that they can go to the Eastern Conference Finals. They wouldn't go trade for OG Anunoby if they didn't. They wouldn't, go out and trade away assets to get Bogdanovich and Burks to shore up the bench if they didn't think they had a chance to make some noise. And as far as the injuries go, Tom Thibodeau will run players into the ground. That's just what he does. He's done his entire career. That's what he does. How they weather the injuries to Anunoby and Randall the next couple of weeks is going to be very interesting. Jalen Brunson is awesome. He has, for now, the second year in a row, just been exactly what the New York Knicks needed. When they're fully healthy, the Knicks can play enough defense that they could really smother a team like a Boston. Well, actually, now they have a wing defender in Anunoby who you can let him go to work on a Jason Tatum and really muck things up. They have, if they get Mitchell Robinson back, they have a competent center that can really make life difficult for a Joel Embiid. And they have Brunson, who is the engine to the offense. Bogdanovich and Burks have, as a person who covers the Pistons, I've watched them be the best and worst players on the floor for Detroit on and off. Bogdanovich is a very bad defender, which is going to drive Tom Thibodeau crazy. And Alec Burks was a chucker until about a month and a half ago when he caught fire. But those are two good guys off the bench that if you need a bucket, they can space the floor. Burks can get a little bit of isolation going. I think the Knicks ceiling is probably the Eastern Conference Finals. More likely they don't make it there. They lose in the second round because for the same reasons that, for the same reason that Dame and Giannis can really muck up a playoff series, I think the Knicks can get mucked up just like they did last year against the Miami Heat, a team that's very good at it and has been good at it for a long time. So I think it's Eastern Conference Finals tops, kind of like the Atlanta Hawks from a couple of years ago, where everything just kind of falls right there. They get hot at the right moment, but they're definitely well equipped to make life difficult for a team like Boston, for a team like the Milwaukee Bucks, and they made life difficult for the Cavs last year with their slew of defenders. So they're very good. Getting Anunoby for Barrett and Quickly was probably a tough pill to swallow, but I think in the end it makes them a much more potent team when the going gets tough in a playoff series when you got to face, a Jason Tatum or a Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Before we get into your other team that you cover, and that's going to be a good conversation because I got a lot of things to say, and I'm sure you do as well about the Detroit Pistons. Is there any other teams that you think are going to be competitive, a little feisty come playoff time? A little teams, obviously the Miami Heat are still there doing the same exact thing they seemingly do every year. They meander through the season. Then Jimmy Butler gets healthy around the playoffs and then gives you everything he has. Obviously, that's a big concern for the teams lurking out there in the Eastern Conference. Plus, also, I mentioned with Alfred, the team he covers, the Orlando Magic, with their size and their length, could be an issue in the playoffs. But is there teams out there left that really can make some noise in the playoffs?
The Heat, for sure. I think they're a little more vulnerable than in the past. I'm sure that they're not too happy that they didn't go after Dame, but Pat Riley seems to have his veil of immunity over some of these things. We went from the Heat need Dame to, the Heat were smart to not give up everything for Dame. But anyway, the Heat are one of those teams that just figures it out in the playoffs. They're a team that, with Butler and their coaching, they just figure out ways to win basketball games, much like they did against Boston last year. They just kind of start to play well when things get tough. So the Heat are definitely a team to watch. Like, for example, I don't want the Cavs to play the Heat in the first round, even though the Cavs are much better and have been playing much better all year. I don't want to play the Heat in the first round. That just seems like a meat grinder of a series that I want no part of. The Magic, I think, are a couple years away still. They are a team that it's been reported sort of inside a couple of ESPN circles and whatnot that they're going to go after a point guard this summer, potentially a guy like Trae Young. And I think that would set them up to be a lot better. But Paolo and Franz are two of the best young wings in the league, and Wendell Carter is playing well. And their guards are going to be ultimately what holds them back or pushes them forward. Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, Markelle Fultz. I mean, those are guys that when they're playing well, it's, life is good, but it's when they're not playing well that it's very difficult to find offense. If you're the Magic, they don't have a whole lot of three-point shooters. But defensively, they're as tough as any team in the league when they're playing at their best. But I think they're still a year or two away and one guard away from being a really, really potent team. But they're feisty, and they were able to rebuild faster than the Pistons, despite having even more barriers in front of them. But the Heat could make noise because that's just kind of what they do. The Magic, less so, but again, they could be really annoying to play against in a first-round series just because of that length that they have on the defensive end.
Once again, I'm on with Mike Anguilano. Please go ahead and support his great shows on the Believe Podcast Network, Fear the Sword and Palace of Pistons. Speaking of the Pistons, I've been hearing it's been called a lot of things this year. We have one of our great, panelists on the show, L. Rob, lives in the Detroit area, and he's just he talked about the ease of access as far as getting seats and the way that it's set up as far as this season because of the turmoil that they've gone through and just the sheer lack of talent there that they've had. I called Troy Weaver, and this comes from a guy who's been seeing Rob Pelinka in his very mismatched up and down decision making over the course of the past few seasons. I've called Troy Weaver the worst GM in NBA and possibly all of sports. Is that a fair assessment based off of his, let's say, decision making as of late?
If he would have traded for Zach LaVine, I would have said absolutely. And he doesn't deserve to be a GM anymore. even without that, I think there's a good chance that he has been the worst GM in the league. His decision making has been questionable at best,
Do you
horrible
do
at.
you think he'll be fired at the end of the season?
I don't, which is insane to say, but the Pistons actually signed him to a contract extension secretly last summer. Um, and I don't necessarily, the details of that extension haven't even come out. Um, so I don't think so, but I think he could be an early season casualty if the Pistons once again just start horribly again. And if he doesn't have a good offseason. The Pistons have just been time and time again hampered by his decision making, from trading Sadiq Bey for James Wiseman, essentially. There were some picks thrown in there as well by the Hawks, but for the most part, he gave up Sadiq Bey for James Wiseman, who's unplayably bad and probably won't be in the NBA next year. His draft picks, Killian Hayes, not on a team, hasn't been picked up on a team. He cleared waivers. He didn't even make it. He gave a contract to Isaiah Stewart because, and this is from The Athletic, that the Pistons wanted to get something out of that 2020 draft, which is a terrible reason for signing a player to save face. So it's been up. It's been mostly down. He's had a couple of okay decisions. I mean, the problem is that drafting Cade Cunningham is not much of a decision. That was everybody's decision. Even if you weren't a GM, if you were just us talking
He
about
was
it,
the
Cade,
definitive number one.
correct.
Yeah, we're not going to go back in hindsight and change the narrative.
No,
Yeah. So I agree with
no,
you.
he was definitely the pick. That's an easy one. The Joe Harris trade, using your cap space on Joe Harris, who once again not on the team, was not a good choice. Monty Morris was a good choice. He turned him into Shake Milton and Troy Brown in a second rounder, who's probably a 13-year-old at this point because it's a 2029 pick. So he's been bad. The worst GM, I can't argue you if you say that definitively he's been the worst. I can't argue that. There's nothing to say that he has not been the worst GM in the league, but I think he is going to get one more crack at it. Trading for Zach LaVine would be a horrendous move for him, even though there was a ton of smoke about it. How he approaches this offseason is going to be huge. They're going to get another lottery pick. They're going to get another top 5 pick. We'll have to see what he does with it. He's going to have one more shot. There was a big spat between him and Tom Gores about who to hire for head coach. Monty Williams versus Kevin Ollie, who just got the head coaching job for the Brooklyn Nets. So the Pistons are going to play Brooklyn on March 7th, I think. I can't wait for these stories to, come out about that. But I think we'll get one more offseason. I think he could be a very early season casualty if things go really poorly. But I can't argue if you were to say he was the worst GM in the league. There's nothing to prove that he hasn't been.
And also, you mentioned and you touched upon it, the coach, Monty Williams, who I had, coming into his term at Phoenix, a ton of respect for. I thought he had done good jobs in several places, and then he comes to Pistons, and I don't know what has happened. I mean, what's the worst part is that I believe he's still the highest paid coach in the league, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Greg Popovich's extension now makes him the highest paid coach. Okay. But there was a period where he was the highest paid coach. He's now number 2. He might be 3 now.
10-year. Okay, well, he's gotten a 10-year. Is that correct?
10? I don't think it's 10. I think it's like 6 or 7.
Okay. All right. It's long.
And they're talking about buyouts already, so it feels even longer.
What has gone wrong with it? As far it's not just a talent issue, it's not just a GM issue. When we talk about the issues of the Lakers, I've always said, even when times were rough, earlier this season, I said it's an organizational issue. It's not just one area of concern, not just the players, the coach, the GM. It's an organizational issue. So some of the blame has to fall on Monty, who's an experienced coach many times over. What has gone wrong with what he's not been able to instill in the Detroit Pistons?
Well, personnel can't be discounted. The personnel is just not good. I mean, he was really set up for failure. So there's a sizable portion of this blame that goes on Troy Weaver. Not giving him a capable shooter is a huge oversight. I mean, with Bogdanovich out to start the year. They had 0 capable shooters. They had no wings. I mean, Asar Thompson is good. He's not a shooter. Alec Burks was ice cold for the first month and a half. They had nobody. Cade was on an island by himself. He wouldn't play Jaden Ivey. So that's another offensive guy that's gone. I mean, just some of it has to be given to Troy Weaver as he made some just bad front office decisions that Monty had to deal with. I mean, it's like Moneyball. You just kind of deprive the manager of any capable players. It's like when they traded Carlos Pena and forced him to play Scott Hatteberg when that was the Billy Bean thing from Moneyball. I mean, sometimes I feel like Troy Weaver did that and kind of set Monty up for failure because Troy Weaver wanted Kevin Ollie, and now he's just giving him a bad roster to deal with. So a lot of it has to do with the GM. Monty's decision-making, though, for rotations has been very strange. Asar Thompson goes in and out of the starting lineup. Jaden Ivey goes in and out of the starting lineup. Sometimes doesn't even get playing time. And the reasons for that have been Ivey doesn't play hard enough on defense. No one's playing hard enough on defense. They're like 28th in the league in defense. So his decision-making has been very odd. Playing James Wiseman as much as he has been odd. I know that, they had Marvin Bagley. Bagley would be a DNP. And James Wiseman's playing over Marvin Bagley. Why? I don't know. Nobody knows. Just very strange rotation decisions. But not playing Ivy has been the biggest what is happening moment. And then Bogdanovich comes back, and lo and behold, the Pistons offense opens up and becomes much better just by having one shooting threat, one old, Eastern European shooting threat, and all of a sudden the Pistons are significantly better looking on offense. So his decision-making with his rotations has been borderline bizarre. But again, some of those things are from Troy Weaver's fault. Why did he sign Marvin Bagley to an extension that nobody else was going to offer? Why did he trade a wing shooter in Bay that the Pistons desperately needed for a backup center that the Golden State Warriors want nothing to do with anymore in James Wiseman? What do? You're just stuck. I see in the chat, Killian Hayes. Monty Williams loved Killian Hayes. Why? I don't know. He played hard on defense, but, I mean, when you can't score, you have to do so much on defense to make up for that lack of offense that there's no point in having him out there. There was a running gag on Pistons Twitter that Monty Williams really wanted Killian Hayes to marry his daughter. He wanted him as a son-in-law.
We say the same thing about Taurean Prince here for Darvin Ham. So
there you go. Taurean Prince is Darvin Ham's prince.
yes.
And just the decision making on the rotations has been nothing short of bizarre. Other than Cade playing as much as he possibly can, and he really has to be careful to not run him into the ground either, because we're already hearing about his blocky, knee and shin acting up already for a team that is not even going to win 14 games this year. So the decision making for Monty's been all over the place, and it's a huge reason why there was a story in the Detroit Free Press today, an op-ed about how Monty's just killing this team and stunting the growth. Right now, it's hard to argue against that. It's hard to say that he is helping these guys. So hopefully by giving him better players to play, he's able to tighten up his rotations. He has a reputation of playing okay with young guys. The Suns, Mikal Bridges, a young wing. He's got one of those in Asar Thompson. Let's see what he can do. But for right now, he looks like a guy that's coaching because he's got a ton of money in his bank account and not because he wanted to coach a young, bad team.
Before we head on out, my friend, I want to go ahead and touch on one last thing with the Detroit Pistons, because Cade Cunningham, is picked number one. I know that Eric says Evan Mobley over Cade Cunningham. At that point in time, everybody was choosing Cade Cunningham as their number one pick. He was the universal number one pick. There was only very small amount of people as far as the draft experts out there that were leaning somewhere else. It was definitively Cade Cunningham. We have seen him play, and I just don't see the things that I saw that he could develop into when I was actually looking at the hours of tape that I saw on him. And I just don't see it all being put together, maybe ever. I'm not so sure. He's still young. He's still got a ways to go. Could possibly be right now, barring whoever you get in the draft going forward, that Jalen Duren could be the best player on the Detroit Pistons when it's all is said and done.
I will strongly go against that. I think
Okay.
it's still Cade. Duran is very good. His ceiling as an offensive player is looks nice. His defensive abilities, I still am questioning. He's still very young. His defensive IQ is not super great. You see him get lost a lot when he's put one on one with other guys, which is problematic. You've seen him be a pretty good rim defender. I think that ceiling, will continue to grow. But Cade is by far the best player on the roster. He has not looked great again because the personnel around him does not accentuate his skill set at all. He needs shooters around him. It'd be great to have another ball handler out there next to him so that he can play more off ball and he can be dangerous off ball as well as a cutter and as a shooter. And that's what made the Jaden Ivey just stapling him to the bench thing even weirder because Ivy showed last year he can play as the two guard and be a playmaker. And he can allow Cade to play off ball. It's one of the things we were very excited about coming into this year is Ivy and Cade playing together and off of each other. And for whatever reason, Monty went to Gillian Hayes, who is not good at any of those things. Can't play off ball because no one cares about him as a shooter. That forced Cade to be the ball handler constantly. There's a reason he led the league in turnovers because he has the highest usage rate in the league and no one to give the ball to. So I think his ceiling is undoubtedly the highest. He can be the guy. I feel very strongly about that. But they have to make a concerted effort to put shooters around him. They need to make a concerted effort to get more capable wings. That's why they went and got Quentin Grimes. He's a 3-and-D guy. He profiles as exactly what the Pistons need. Asar Thompson, again, profiles exactly what the Pistons need as long as he can start to develop that corner three or at least be more open to taking it. He's in a very Isaac Okoro way right now of he's very athletic and fast and a good defender, but he just doesn't have the shot yet. Okoro is getting there, but look, it took 4 years.
Yeah.
But I think Cade can certainly be the guy. Duran is good. He's not untouchable. But Cade to me still is untouchable. I think you have to build around him. And, if Troy Weaver wants to save his job, he needs to make a concerted effort to put more shooting around Cade Cunningham and put more wings, capable wings around him and start to build out this roster.
Once again, it is Mike Anguilano. Please go ahead and support him today on his Believe Network podcast, The Palace of Pistons and Fear the Sword. So before we go, Mike, it is the cheap pitch time, as we'd love to go ahead and have our guests do here. Please go ahead and let all of our great audiences, both audio and video, know exactly what you're up to out there on the sports world, covering the Cavs and the Pistons.
Yes. Well, you said it at the top of the show. You can follow me on Twitter or X or whatever you still call it at my last name, M22. I'm very active on there. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about the NBA. That's why I have it. And I do write for Fear the Sword, part of SB Nation. We're gearing up to have the second half of the season come together. The Cavs play the Magic, and you'll see plenty of my game previews and stock up, stock down over there at Fear the Sword. And then for Palace of Pistons, I'm the host of the Palace of Pistons podcast, and that's part of the Believe Network. We recently moved over to a Substack. We would certainly appreciate as many people subscribing to that as possible. Moved away from our website, moved over to Substack. We feel that's the best way to directly reach people. So certainly check out Palace of Pistons on Twitter, and you'll be able to subscribe to our Substack and get all that content directly to you. We have a lot of fun on the Palace of Pistons podcast. We have a good group of guys that we were the first ones to say a year and a half ago that Troy Weaver doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and we were mocked furiously on YouTube for that. And turns out we were onto something. Turns out we were kind of right.
That's okay. We're the first to talk bad about Rob Pelinka and Darvin Ham, and we've got roasted. And then again, we've heard it, but then once the Lakers do bad, suddenly we are called geniuses and things of that nature. So it's amazing how this is. I will ask you about Killian Hayes real quick because
Sure.
I really feel bad for the kid because so much was put upon him. What's his name from the Athletic picked him number one. Kind of got a lot of scout. Kevin O'Connor, yeah, that's right. Kevin O'Connor,
yes,
yeah, for the Ringer. You're right, the Ringer. He picked him number one. put a lot of heat on that kid right away. It never materialized, and obviously the result was him getting released by Troy Weaver. Do you ever see a future for that kid? Because again, I would like to root for him. I liken it to a guy that's now up for the Hall of Fame in Chauncey Billups, who is also a high draft pick who was let go at an early stage and found his rhythms somewhere else.
I feel bad for Killian as well. He was obviously highly touted by Kevin O'Connor and many others as well. It wasn't just Kevin O'Connor saying he was the best prospect. I think there is a future for Killian Hayes. I don't know if it's in the NBA or not. I think some team will take a chance on him. Some team like the Memphis Grizzlies, who are so injured that they have to find somebody to play. He could do okay there. I think the San Antonio Spurs should be looking to pair him with fellow Frenchman Victor Wembanyama, and that's another guy that he would be able to play many minutes for San Antonio, a very low risk environment. But I've seen people say the Cavs should sign him as their backup point guard, or that the Lakers should sign him. Killian Hayes cannot go into high leverage situations. He didn't do well in low leverage situations. He doesn't have that killer drive right now, certainly not on offense. You can't trust him to do anything on offense. You need to really rework him as a player. Defensively, I think he's got something there. He's got some juice to him. His playmaking it's questionable. He doesn't necessarily make smart passes. I've watched 2 Pistons games live, both when they were facing the Cavs, and both of them were some of the worst basketball games I've ever watched him play. I think he needs another low level, low risk environment like a Memphis where they're not playing for anything, or San Antonio where they're not playing for anything, just to sort of reset himself. The Spurs, I think, would be a great spot with Victor. The Grizzlies would give him plenty of playing time. But I think there's something for him in this league. The situation he came into with Detroit was not a good one. Again, it was in flux. It was in between tenures where, they were getting rid of Blake Griffin and trying to rebuild. They immediately went out and took another point guard the next year in Cade. So they already had kind of some iffy thoughts about him. He came in during COVID, which was a very difficult time. It was hard to evaluate prospects during COVID for everybody. So he came into a bad situation. I hope that he makes it in this league. I just don't necessarily know if he doesn't have the confidence to even just take a layup, because there were nights where he would pass up open shots or just look totally clueless out there on the offensive end, that you really hope that he could figure it out, but it's going to have to be in a very particular situation.
We've had a player like that in Jared Vanderbilt, who does so much in the defensive end, but yet at times he has appeared petrified of shooting the basketball either close or from long distance. And, just before he got injured, he finally found a niche. Just drive to the basket. Just run to the basket. We'll throw you the ball deep in there. Just go to the basket, stay near the basket, offensive rebounds, and also be open, cut to the basket. Just be open for some lobs, and there you go. They finally found a niche for him, and then of course he got injured. So hopefully when he comes back, they can finally regain that spot for Jared Vanderbilt again. But I liken it to Killian Hayes, and that Killian Hayes I have seen play good defense on at an NBA level, as far as what I've seen, and that to me is a skill and a talent that's hard to replicate. But you're right. If he's so much of a minus on the offensive end, like Jared Vanderbilt was when he came back earlier this year from his injuries, he was absolutely terrible on offense and absolutely a minus. So it's a tough call whether you take a chance on that kid, because he has to become at least somewhat efficient, just not even league average, just get to below average on offense. Yeah, below average on offense, just enough to where your defense stands out and a team can utilize that. And if you can, he's got good size. I think he does have some good passing skills, but again, it all depends on, like you said, what he can do on the offensive end. If he can never figure that out, he'll go down as one of the biggest draft busts ever.
Yep, agreed.
Well, Mike, it's great to have you here as always. You pop in from time to time in the chat. I've seen you on Twitter and absolutely cannot thank you enough for following us. Again, please come back anytime you want to go ahead and chat with us. But any last thoughts, my friend, before we head on out?
I'm just happy that there was no Donovan Mitchell to the Lakers questions in the chat.
You know what? That's we're not going to count our horses on that, because the thing is, so many teams, Rob Pelinka said it best. He said, oh yeah, we didn't make any trades because we really didn't have enough assets and we really couldn't make a really good deal. We're going to get extra picks in the summer. Everything's going to be, just fancy roses and la la. Well, again, you're getting extra picks, but so is Golden State. So is Philadelphia. So is New York. So is, list goes. Oklahoma has like 500 picks. Indiana, just the list goes on. New Orleans. Yeah, I could name off 7 or 8 teams that are going to have substantial resources, most of which will have more than the Lakers to offer if there's a big name that comes out. It all depends on if that player wants to go to the Lakers and, the drama that plays out at their end. But yeah, if Donovan Mitchell is the case, whether he wants to go to New York, whether he stays with Cleveland, whether he goes to the Lakers, I don't even want to start that yet. I know we've touched on it here in the past couple of days on the show, but again, Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, let's let the season play out before we really start getting into that, Mike.
Yeah, there's the whole second half of the season to go. And if the Cavs don't make it out of the first round, I don't want to think about the next couple days after that. Let's just hope that they get out of the first round, because then those cries are going to be even louder. And I'm not ready for that mentally.
Kurt Affair, stop trying to start trouble there. Start trying to start trouble. But I truly appreciate you, Kurt, Bloodhound, everybody that was part of the chat, the best Lakers chat with us out there. And of course, especially to you, Mike, for taking the time out of your day to talk with us, previewing the Eastern Conference for the rest of the way. Hopefully you could stop back in this season, at least before the playoffs, or give us a playoff preview. Hopefully you and Alfred can go ahead and do that, because I'd love to have you both back on the air to do just that, my friend.
Sure, of course, anytime.
All right. Always great to have you here, and always great to have you a part of the Lakers Fast Break podcast.